if you're having a hard time wrapping your head around the fact that you finally graduated from one of the great universities in Canada, imagine how I'm feeling. You're getting a degree because of hard work, dedication, and sacrifice. I'm getting a doctorate because I have a comedy show. It's a great country. Anything is possible. Anything is possible, and you embody that. And what an honor to look out at you, filled with such hope and promise and crushing personal debt. At this point in your life, I know there must be a lot of unknowns. I asked my sister, actually, because she's the graduate in the family. I asked my sister what was going through her mind when she graduated. And she said, in hindsight, probably fear. Fear because she didn't know what she was going to do next. She didn't know where her degree would bring her. Eventually, her degree brought her back to school. But she said there was a lot of unknowns because she didn't know what it was that she was going to do. You know, you spend your entire life wondering what you're going to do when you grow up, and suddenly you blink and you're wearing a cap and a gown and you're supposed to have the answer. So she was afraid. Now, luckily, I never ever experienced that because I always knew what I wanted to do. I'm one of the very few lucky ones, always knew what I wanted to do from a very young age. My dream in grade 6 is the same as it is now. Astronaut. I remember distinctly being in grade 6, and it was a big day. I was sitting there and I was so bored, and Mrs. Burns announced that she would be showing a film. Now, most of you are far too young to remember the notion that moving pictures in the classroom was a very exciting day. And she played this film, and it wasn't just any film. It was astronauts in zero gravity. And it was the most amazing thing I had ever seen. They were in this stunt plane and floating around in zero gravity. And my mind was blown. And then the film made it very clear that the only people who would ever experience zero gravity were the brave men and women of the American space program. And I can remember thinking in grade 6, as God is my witness, I don't care what it takes, I will do it. I will work hard, I will excel at math and science, I will move to that country, I will be an astronaut. And I raised my hand and I told Mrs. Burns, and she said, not with your marks, Buster. And my dream fell to earth. Or more likely, I saw something shiny and got distracted and moved on. Now, a different man would have said, you know, what the heck with Mrs. Burns, I will accomplish this goal. I'm not that man. In fact, I just goofed off. I got through school by the skin of my teeth and ended up with a comedy show. But because of the comedy show, 2 years ago, I experienced zero gravity with the Canadian space program. That's a good day at the office right there. And yes, I called Mrs. Burns. First I called around to see if she was alive. She was. I gave her a call. But anything is possible. You know, I believe I have the best job in the country. I'm so grateful for it. But because I have the job that I have not unpacked in 11 years. And because I have not unpacked in 11 years, I get to look at a map of Canada the way most people look at a map of their hometown. You know, I started out in Newfoundland and Nova Scotia, now I'm in Toronto. So I won't say I live in the center of the universe, but I look at it and I say, I live downtown. I'm downtown. And then I look at the map. Do you ever make it out to the east end of town? Oh, the east end of town? Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, PEI, at least 30 times a year. Ever make it up to the west end of town? I'm always in the west end of town. British Columbia, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, yes, at least 30, 40 times a year. Twice a year, I go to a Calorie to see what a $25 tomato tastes like. True Canadian experiences. But that is what I wish for you, and that is what I implore of you. As you go forward, take time to get to know your country. Canada is a wonderful country, and we all know this. But there are two problems that we face, and there really aren't any solutions. We're too big, and there's too few of us. And far too often, we find ourselves in situations where regions of this country are being played against other regions of this country, where groups of people are being played against other groups of people, whether it's West versus East, or French versus English, or rural versus urban. And we live in a country where if you go to Pearson Airport this afternoon, you can fly to Miami for half the price of flying to Halifax. You can fly to London, England, cheaper than you can fly to British Columbia. so we often don't know our country. So I beg of you to make that a priority as you go forward. Get to know our country, and get to know all of it, not just its major cities. Get to know all its towns, all its villages. We like to talk about how we are so touched by the North, and the North affects us, but so few of us stand above the tree line. If you stand above the tree line in your lifetime, I promise you, you will love this country more than ever, and that will make for a better country because we fight for what we love. I ask of you to get to know your country. It is... Now, it's tradition that the person giving the convocation address offers advice to you, the graduating class. I have to tell you, I feel entirely unqualified to give you any advice, because you've already accomplished something that I never did. But being unqualified has never stopped me from trying. In fact, that could be the secret to whatever success I've had. So here goes. This is the advice. Wherever possible, surround yourself with the very best people. Now, I know that sounds so cliche. It sounds so straightforward and obvious, but believe me, this is what I've learned. No matter what occupation you end up working in, it is very tempting to surround yourself with people who will not challenge you or will not question you. And if you arrange it so, or if you wake up and you realize that you were the smartest person in the room, it's time to go find another room. Always remember that. And remember that the solutions to any problem, whether they're professional or personal, they can come from anywhere. Anywhere at all. The most unlikely people, the most unlikely places. You know, I felt it incumbent upon me to give you some examples of leadership, that was my job. And I've been very fortunate in my work. I've got to see great examples of leadership in my professional career. Political leadership, believe it or not. Military leaders, business leaders, comedy show leaders. I've seen lots of examples of great leadership. But the one example that I kept coming back to that I thought I would talk about of leadership were two men. I didn't even know their names. I just know their story. But I think it's appropriate because they are pretty much from your generation. You know, we talk about problems that we face as a society. One of the problems that we face now, more than ever, is this notion of bullying and cyberbullying and the social media bullying. And this is a real problem now. And it's changed. It's become so dramatic. And we are all aware of the problem. It's on the national radar. But long before it was on the national radar, long before Peter Mansbridge was talking about it, or if it was on the cover of Maclean's, it just existed and nothing was being done. And about 5 or 6 years ago, in the Annapolis Valley, this young man moved there with his family, and he went to school on the very first day of high school. You remember what a stressful day that would be anyway. Well, for this guy, he was in a new province, a new place, he didn't know a soul, first day of school. So he wanted to make a good impression. So he wore his best fancy pink shirt on the first day of school. Well, that didn't go over very well. And he got teased and he got harassed. And you know what? Big deal. It's high school and those things happen. But a group of people, they continued to harass him, and it became insidious, and it went online, and it was never ending. And it got worse and worse. And then eventually, he was physically assaulted. And it was so bad that someone called the police. And then we had a situation where the police arrived, and things haven't changed that much since when I went to high school, or perhaps when you went to high school. Suddenly, nobody saw a thing. The student who was assaulted, he didn't know who did it, of course. No teacher saw anything because they weren't around, and no other students were stepping up. So they had a situation where they were in the principal's office with the police, the parents, this young man, and they said, you know what, there's nothing that can be done. Maybe you shouldn't have worn that pink shirt to school. Don't do that again. Well, that night, 2 kids who went to that school took it upon themselves to go to Walmart and buy every single pink piece of clothing they could find. And they went to school the next day, because everyone knew who the bullies were. They went to school the next day, and they distributed the pink clothing. The first people they distributed to was the football team, and then everyone else. And when those bullies, when they went into the lunchroom on that day and sat down like the cock of the block, suddenly they looked up and they were surrounded by an entire school wearing pink. Message sent. days later, the media get wind of it. They call up one of these young men who went to Walmart and bought the pink clothes and said, "Are you the kid who went to Walmart and bought the pink clothes?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "With your own money?" He said, "Yeah." She said, "Why would you do that?" And he said, and he didn't have an answer. So he made one up. He said, "Oh, did you know it's the International Day of Pink?" It's a day when students stand up against violence and bullying in schools. And so she wrote it down. Oh, International Day of Pink. Apparently. And then she filed the story, and then the story went viral. 3 months ago, on the International Day of Pink, over 11 million students in North America wore pink on the International Day of Pink. Barack Obama wore a pink shirt.